Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of Live with the Conservatory of Flowers. My name is Drew, and I am joined tonight with my colleague Sarah. Hi,
Hello.
Sarah. How's it going?
It's going great. It's been a wonderful corpse flower bloom, but I'm a little sad it's almost over. Also a little relieved it's almost over.
Yeah, it's always a bittersweet time.
Mm-hmm.
Always a bittersweet time when they decide to fade away finally. But yeah, definitely tonight we have some interesting information for everyone out there about conservation and the Sumatran home of the famous corpse flower. But first, let's take a quick live look at our corpse flower friend, which is right here. There's Terra the Titan, still upright, which is pretty good for the moment. We've got just a limited amount of time for it to start collapsing. That spadix there, any day now, will start to just kind of flop on over, and we'll slowly see the decay of Terra the Titan for this round anyway. So pretty amazing. I was there yesterday and enjoyed both the scent and the sharing with visitors of all the fun things, all the fun information that we know about these plants. So yeah.
And it's a pretty special thing to get to have this plant bloom in a place where so many San Franciscans, in this case, can see it. And really across the world now, there are a lot of these plants in cultivation, which is great for this species because it's an endangered species. Yet we definitely, when we have one of these bloom events, we want to remember this plant, although it can grow well in a pot in a conservatory, its native home is Sumatra and an incredible rainforest there. That this plant hails from. So it's also endemic to Sumatra, meaning it grows nowhere else on Earth. So Sumatra, let's take a little trip across the world and see a little more closely where this plant is from. And I'm going to take you on a journey across the world. We'll take a look. Sumatra is an island, and it's part of the country of Indonesia. But it's quite a large island. I believe it's the 6th largest island in the world, and it has about 50 million people living there. So it's certainly a big and populous place, and it's also home to a really remarkable rainforest. And in these rainforests, this is where you can find the Titan Arum growing in the wild, and it prefers growing on steep hillsides. So I can only imagine that finding this plant out there would be pretty difficult. So Drew, do people go out and find this plant out in Sumatra?
As far as I know, kind of would be my easiest answer. It's definitely, like you said, difficult to access, so it doesn't really lend itself easily to being found. It's steep equatorial rainforest hillsides. They do like growing like deep in the rainforest, but as far as I know, they prefer like kind of a clearing, like where maybe a tree has fallen and they can get lots of natural sunlight. These are some of my favorite pictures, actually, these old ones that we're seeing here. This is a photograph of one Titan Arum that's in bloom there on the right, and one that's in leaf stage, full leaf there on the left. And you can really see how big these plants can actually get. So do you know, I can't really tell when this would have been taken, but do you have any idea, Sarah?
I don't actually know when this photo was taken. So
looks like around the turn of the century, if I had to guess.
Shows how infrequently this plant is photographed in its natural habitat. It is found out there occasionally, and it's good that there have been surveys done actually by the IUCN that does a lot of work in conservation and identifying species, and they've actually done a survey of this plant and shown that there are probably fewer than 1,000, fortunately, fewer than 1,000 individuals growing in Sumatra. It's considered an endangered species. Its population is in decline, but we'll talk a lot about what we can do to help protect it. But let's talk a little bit more about Sumatra in general, not just this particular plant first. So back to Sumatra, Drew, there are a lot of other amazing plants that grow in Sumatra in addition to the species. This one is one of my personal favorites. It reminds me of a cartoon, but it's a real live plant. What is this?
I know, and it also reminds me there's a Pokemon that very closely resembles this plant, like many plants. This is the Rafflesia. I think this one's probably Rafflesia arnoldii, which, the corpse flower gets confused for being the largest flower on Earth, but that actually goes to this one here. I find it interesting that they both smell like rotting flesh, and they both live in Indonesia, and they both inhabit the island of Sumatra.
Yeah. And others, its area is also really renowned for its orchid diversity. I've read that there are over 1,000 different orchid species that have been identified there. So these are just a very few of them, but tremendous diversity in that group too. And even here's a plant that at least is related to many of the Nepenthes you can see at the conservatory. This is the carnivorous pitcher plant species that's Nepenthes sumatrana, so definitely a Sumatran species. And this is just a tiny fragment of the incredible wealth of plant life that you can find in this part of the world. It's even among rainforests known as being one of the most biodiverse rainforest regions out there. So a pretty incredible part of the world. And to be one of the most biodiverse rainforests is exceptional because rainforests in general, they're live to harbor about half of our planet's species, even though they take about 3% of the Earth's surface. Yeah. So incredible places. We've also got lots of animals in this region that call it home, famous for its orangutans. What are some other species that call Sumatra home?
I know that the Sumatran rhino, I believe, lives there. The two-horned rhino, which are beautiful creatures, definitely endangered there. I want to say there's the Asian elephant lives there. We've got Sumatran tigers, which are very, very rare. So really a whole host of endangered animals, but really incredible flora and fauna both that inhabit this island.
Yeah, so all of these species are really interconnected with each other. These animals rely on the plants rely on the animals. So important to protect this home. And then one other animal I like to mention is this one here. Oops, yeah. Let me pull it up. So this one has a curious relationship with our Titan Arum, actually. This is called the rhinoceros hornbill. It's a pretty spectacular bird. And why does this bird rely on our famous plant?
Must be for food for part of the year. They're known for being dispersers of the seeds for the Titan Arum. So they would, we actually pollinated Terra, you might have heard in our other videos, and we're hoping that it'll produce fruit. And in the wild, that fruit would be eaten by these birds. The seeds are really hard, so they would go through the digestive system and come out on the other end. So the bird gets food and the plant gets to be dispersed all over the rainforest.
Yeah, so many of the species we just mentioned also are endangered or threatened in the case of the hornbill. So it's a challenging situation for these species, but there's a lot that we can do to help them out. And one is just learning what some of the challenges they're facing are. So the main challenge in Indonesia is really habitat loss. And a lot of that is driven by agriculture, and specifically to create palm oil. So palm oil is a funny ingredient that is in so much of what we use in our day-to-day life, and yet it kind of masquerades around under different names. But where are we eating and putting palm oil in our lives?
Oh man, common. Yeah, it's so common. Honestly, the better question is like where we aren't getting palm oil. It's in a lot of foods as sort of a binding agent. It also makes things just kind of have a more creamy texture. I was sad to find out that one of my favorite ice cream brands uses it to make their ice cream creamier. So it's all over the place. It's one of those things that I think it's really hard to avoid. So it's really more about the products that we choose that source it sustainably. Mm-hmm. Would you agree, Sarah?
Yeah, absolutely. So
in candy, it's in so much.
It's in a lot. It's pretty hard to escape and remove all palm oil from
cereal.
Your diet. And hope to use less, perhaps. It's really about where we source it. That's the big question. But We'll get to that in a second. I just also wanted to show you the fruit of the oil palm, because it's really kind of spectacular looking, but this is where the oil is extracted from this and produces this really prolific oil. And it is very useful, almost to the detriment of the habitats where it's from. And really, in a lot of tropical parts of the world, we've seen these massive palm plantations pop up, and that's really been behind it. But globally, we've seen consumption of palm oil go up about 5-fold in the last 30 years. So this is just one of a whole lot of products that we get from the rainforest, though, that are really important to supporting human communities. And it's difficult. We want to balance protecting these habitats with also making sure people have a lot of the things they need. We want to make sure that the communities living in these tropical regions have resources that they need. That a lot of oil, of course, is going across the entire world. So really thinking about our own consumption habits can make a big difference. So excuse me a second. One thing we can look out for are that there are a lot of certifications that have come into the world for producing palm oil more sustainably. Also, pulp and paper products are another big driver of deforestation, and there are things like the Rainforest Alliance certification. So these can be some good signals of a product that is using more sustainable practices, perhaps palm oil that's made where its sources are tracked, and it's ensured that it's not a product made in an area with illegal deforestation. A fair trade certification might guarantee that workers have a fair wage and good living conditions. So these things can help, but we always have to be really vigilant and make sure that these certifications are holding things to a high standard for sustainability, and really making sure that we can have rainforests for future generations, for all of the life that thrives in these areas, for the millions of people that rely on rainforests in all kinds of ways, for food, for fuel, for fiber, and also for the air that we breathe, and for helping buffer us against climate change. I mean, I could go on all evening here, but really the incredible wealth of rainforest that supports plants, that supports us, and we're lucky to have them. So there's a whole lot more to learn about this, but that's just a short version. But we do have a couple of questions I've noticed. From Aaron out there. This is what I've kind of a couple times over the last few days, and I love this question. How long does the plant live?
I was actually just going to pull up something I found on the IUCN about this. Hang on just a second. But what have you heard, Sarah, while we're here?
The answer that I've kind of come upon is that we don't entirely know, because this plant hasn't been super well studied in the wild, and it's come into cultivation fairly recently. So the plants that have been grown in conservatories like ours are pretty young. So how long does it live? We'll find out in a conservatory or garden context. In the wild, it could be an entirely different story too, but maybe the IUCN has some better information than that.
Yeah, they had said basically essentially the same. The generation length is what they have here. It says 30 to 50 years. So that would give us, it is still a really, really wide range. So it's hard to say, but I think that the answer I saw with you and Kristen earlier today was probably the best answer we could give, because the specimens are really old. We've only really had them even in cultivation since the first one for just over 100 years. So that's only maybe 2 of these plants' lives, according to the IUCN. So kind of wild. Good question.
Another comment/question from San Francisco Bay Times Video. Hello. The question was, will Terra continue to be on view, and will other plants be featured there in the future?
That is a great question. I would say we'll probably keep it there as long as it's safe for the plant, depending on weather conditions and things. But we also have to start taking it off display, because it'll start breaking down parts of it, and we have to make sure it's really clean so that the plant doesn't get any rot or anything like that. But I have to say, our horticulture team certainly likes putting anything that they can on display for you. So if it's not the corpse flower, they'll probably put together another amazing front of house display.
Yeah, I've noticed some beautiful displays of orchids rotate through the
Hmm.
vestibule, and sometimes you can peek in the windows of aquatics and potted plants, or not potted, the West Gallery as well, and
Right.
a few other things.
Oh, they did say there in the West Gallery there's the two other corpse flowers. There's two
Hmm.
of the other corpse flowers that are currently putting up leaves, so you can watch their development through the front doors of the western part of the building.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, this is great. I think we're just about ready to get going, but sort of when we talk about conservation, I always want to hold on to a hope
Yeah.
for the plants and species that we're protecting. And something that gives me hope is really seeing these moments in our botanical world where people get really excited about a plant like the corpse flower.
Mhm.
And it gives us a chance to really marvel at this incredible life form and learn more about it and learn about the place it's from and how we can work together to protect it. So we're really lucky to be able to share all of this
Yeah.
with you here at the conservatory, and we'll look forward to sharing a whole lot more in the future. But thank you so much for tuning in for all of these broadcasts. This is our last one, but I think we'll be back not immediately, but we'll probably
Yeah.
future broadcasts about other plants in our collection. It's not just the coarse flower. There are thousands more amazing rare tropical plants
Yeah.
at the conservatory. So
I
uh,
think our estimate now is something like over 2,000 species we have displayed, varying rarities from the corpse flower at endangered. We have a few that are extinct in the wild to things that are everyday in household, like the monstera behind you there and some of my orchids here. So from the normal and everyday to the strange and bizarre, we've got it covered. So we'll be excited to bring more content your way.
yeah. All right. Thank you so much and have a great evening. And still stop by the conservatory and peek in those windows. You never know what you'll
Yeah.
see. And someday we'll be open for you again.
Yeah.
Bye.